Hey guys, welcome back to another video on our channel Unboxing Perspectives. I am Kanika and today I am here with another episode on our playlist, that is Kahani Aapki Zubani. In this episode, we get together with other readers and we talk about the books which they enjoyed and they found very wonderful. So today in this video, we are having Siddharth Gupta, who is founder of Voyager Capital, as well as a channel like us, that is Kitabi Karwan. On Kitabi Karwan, he shares podcasts of various authors as well as his own views about the books that he loves. So today we are having three most emotional books that he have read and the books that he loved. And these books are by the Indian authors, three female Indian writers who have such a wide range of emotion displayed in these stories that you will love the video. So to get your heart broken and to feel the pain of literature and the people that we're talking about in these stories, you should stay with us till the end of the video to know what we feel about it and how we connect it with the movies that we see, with the stories that we have around us, and with the story that you are going to read. So I welcome Siddharth to our channel and I hope you stay with us till the end and enjoy the conversation. So I welcome Siddharth on our channel for the discussion. Thank you so much, Siddharth, for coming and joining us. And so today we are here to discuss on three special books, and we will start with the video. So which is the first book that you are going to talk about?
First of all, thank you, Kanika, for having me on your channel. I was really keen on doing this because I've actually enjoyed the content on your channel, and I believe it's a very interesting format that you follow. I think the first book that we can talk about is The Illuminated by Anandita Ghosh. I'll just give you a quick brief of the book. One of the most beautiful books I've read in recent times by a first-time author. It starts off with a very interesting, well, I found it interesting. Some might find it slightly shocking. And it's not a spoiler per se because it's the first page of the book. But it starts off the notion or the conversation around the death of a father or a husband. It talks, the narrative begins with a woman talking about the death of her husband. And the journey of the book is the journey of this woman and her daughter exploring life and particularly their own connection and relationship with each other in this context of losing this quote unquote male figure in their life, right? Like a husband and a father. The beauty of this is that both of them enjoyed great relationship with the male figure, but they didn't particularly have great relations with each other. They have fond memories. It's not that there's a hatred that exists between them. And this is a very interesting journey as to how the mother discovers, life apart from the marriage, and this goes beyond gender, I guess. I think companionship is something that cuts across gender and sexuality and all of those borders which human beings draw for ourselves. But it's a beautiful story of an individual trying to find herself after years of marriage, of years of companionship. And this interesting parallel of her daughter who's chosen a path to walk on. And she's studying in a particular university where she chances upon an encounter with a senior respected academic and gets to work with him. And it explores her relationship with him and how it progresses throughout her tenure there. And obviously the context being this fatherly figure kind of playing a role in her life and how that happens. And we see this beautiful journey of how things transpire and how things interact with each other. So it's a beautifully written book. It's very different from the usual kind of fiction that I can very confidently say for all these three books that we'll talk about today. It's very different from the usual kind of fiction that you'd read in the sense that the narrative is simultaneously both simple, flowing, and at the same time slightly unnerving and complicated. So I guess that's what I can tell you about the first book.
Okay, so this book actually explored the relationship between a mother, a daughter, a father, and husband. So you will find like many relationships that can be there with an individual. And as you already told about Anandita Ghosh, so she is a first-time writer for this book. This book is a debut book for her.
Yeah.
So what do you think about her writing style and what do you find so unique or good about it?
Right. So, again, just a little bit context, just an introduction for Anandita. Anandita was the editor of the Mint Lounge, and I had read some of her work in the papers before I found out that she's coming out with her book. And coincidentally, I also run my podcast where I have interviewed her for her work. And I remember I reached out to her just like the moment I heard about the announcement of the book. It was not even because I'd been following her work for a while in the papers, and I always loved the way she wrote because it's Ananta's writing is I am struggling to come up with the perfect words for it, but it's so precise and it's so sharp that but it never feels that way. It's the words aren't jarring. Like you will not realize how deeply emotional the text has gotten all of a sudden until you feel the teardrop fall from your eye on the page, right?
It's
And
smooth,
that's the beauty.
understanding, yet complicated.
Absolutely. This ability to create an entire world and make beyond that making a person believe that this is something that is actually affecting them visually and maybe audio for movies, and for books it's even more difficult, right? It's just text, so it's not you're reading a word that is written. It's only your brain which is somehow has managed to convince you or transport you into this world, and it's a very difficult ability to have. So that's why I've always the most sincerest of respect for creators. Anandita is based out of Mumbai, and a lot of her work has this tinge. Like maybe if I'm to be critical of her work, which I don't particularly think this is a criticism, but it's an observation per se, that it has an urban tinge to it, right? Like maybe someone from the interiors of India might not resonate with that work. But that being said, a lot of the issues that she talks about are issues of not only urban India, but on a broader scale, India as whole, right? So there's a very interesting attempt by her to kind of draw that parallel as well. But for me, the book, I was sold about the relationships. That's what stood out for me in the book, rather than this socio-political commentary that she also tried.
Okay, so that's I've not read the book yet, but yes, after listening to everything that you're saying around, I think I will pick it up very soon because it's like a comp. I have read some books, Khalid Hosseini's book, and I mean,
Mhm.
in every of his book, like maybe the Thousand Splendid Suns or Kite Runner, they follow this theme, and they also go into this depth of the relationship that we have. So these books are, I feel like, quite heartwarming, and if you are into a position where you want to read something like very good, then we can also go for these. So it's something that you can relate to the title. Like I feel the title is quite new, the Illuminated.
Right,
It's
right,
usually to some
right,
sort of guidance or lights or something like that. So what do you think
right.
that the title is resonating with the story?
Right. Actually, I'd like to show you the cover, which will give you an interesting idea. So if you can see, the cover has all the representations of the moon on it, like all the different phases the moon passes throughout,
Yeah.
right? And a very interesting thing that Anandita does is name chapters, characters very slyly, using different synonyms of the word moon, right? And
Oh,
the illuminated is supposed to kind of reflect, and that is again my read and my understanding of it. Obviously, like it's the author's world, what they create. But the idea of how light is the moon always exists, but our visibility to it or our ability to perceive it or the illumination that the moon generates is based out of the light that falls on it and the kind of
right.
illumination it generates, or the phases that the moon goes through in those 27 days in which it revolves around the earth. The interesting bit is there's nothing that changes on the moon. It's just our perception of the moon that is changing, right? Based on where you are on the earth, you either see a quarter moon or half moon or a
Right.
full moon or a no moon. And I think that's what she's trying to kind of reflect through the title, that it's the journey of the moon, and it starts from the death of this father slash husband, which could possibly be an idea of a no moon, and reflect reaching this situation of a full moon, where these women find complete illumination independent of uh, any other circumstance or context in their life, and are fully reflected for their own individual selves. So yeah, it was a very interesting title that popped up for me. But if I'm being perfectly honest, this was one of the books I picked up for the authors and not for the title or
Story.
the blurb that pops up. Right? It was purely I had read Anandita's work as a journalist, as an editor, and I really loved her writing, and I couldn't wait to kind of pick up her work more.
Yeah, but other than that, I felt that the title was like really, really good, and the way you explained it made it more interesting and apt for the story that you are going for it. And
Yeah.
what is that? I actually say in most of my videos that I am a fiction reader. So, in
Okay.
spite of the fact that I am not a non-fiction reader and I am not going for self-help books or some books that can give you teachings or no, but yet there are fiction books from where we learn. We have something in each and every book that is very close to us, and we want to share it with everyone we come in contact. So is there something in this book that you want our listeners or the viewers to take away with them?
Personally, for me, one of the biggest messages that I took from this book, two messages that in fact I think I can think of. People kind of take your relationships, whether it's with their parents or friends, sort of for granted, not in the context of taking the person for granted, but the kind of privileges you enjoy with the person, right? Let's talk about the fact that, say, you have a fight with your mother, and you hear of cases people haven't spoken to their parents for 10 years. Or maybe that's a more extreme example. You just don't talk to your parents as much. Like you talk to them once a week or once a month, or they don't really know what's happening in your life about how you're feeling in that computer science course, or how your boss is making you feel, or maybe you made a loss in your business, or made a profit in your business, for all you know. But so yeah, that was the first message I took away. That I think both in the sense of that everyone's life is fixed. There's a certain kind of, no one's immortal, so you have finite amount of time with the person around you, and you might think you have all the time in the world to repair those relationships, or you don't want to. But there are certain relationships that you must kind of put in the effort for and strive to work for it, because you just don't want to be late there. I think the second thing is that I understand companionship forms a very core part of who you are eventually, because if you spend 25, 30 years with a person, they kind of, that person's just like a habit, after a point of time, a habit for you, right? And it's shocking when that habit just goes away from your life. I might be speaking from a perspective of not knowing things, but I think it is important to realize that you as an individual can exist beyond the equation that you are in,
Beyond the
right?
person, beyond that relationship. And yeah, I am finding it quite interesting. So I will surely put it in my TBR to be read very soon. Okay. And then moving on to the next book, which is the next book that you will be talking.
So the next book that I want to talk about is very easily one of my favorite books of all time. To the extent, very weirdly enough, that is a book I've read only once, because I
Okay.
am sort of scared to read it again, if I can put it that way. Um,
Okay.
the name of the book is All the Lives We Never Lived by Anuradha Roy. Uh, it is a fantastic book, like a book that has made me feel so many things. It's a very simple premise. It's a story of the narrator is a simple gardener in, I forgot, a town in North India. So the plot picks up from like this old man who's thinking about his younger life, and then we go back to this pre-partition time. So this old man's father was a freedom fighter, very principled freedom fighter, uh, right? And so now he's shown to be like a liberal freedom fighter who's trying to fight for India's rights and freedom and things like that. While he's married to this beautiful woman who's an artist at heart, right? Who used to engage with a lot of artwork in the form of dancing and painting, and a lot of it has been clamped down post her marriage, like due to both due to no support from a husband, or like somewhat putting her down, and just generally a lot of other things, right? So it's this person's, like, mind you, it's not an abusive marriage,
Right.
right? It's not a marriage where, I mean, it's surely a patriarchal marriage in the sense that you
So
clearly
it's
have
the
the
way the
male.
society works in that time.
Yeah, unfortunately, like a more, and like you can imagine a pre-partition one, so like maybe 60, 70 years ago, how society, 80, 90 years ago, in fact, how society would have worked then. But it's not abusive, if I can maybe put in that excuse to that extent, right? That there's no physical abuse or verbal abuse. It's just a marriage, like a
Right.
conventional patriarchal marriage that exists. Events that transpire, again, not a spoiler, but that she eventually runs away from this house when the narrator is 10 or 12, like a kid. The book is about this person coming to terms with the journey his mother took, and reconciling himself with her journey and about how ultimately gets himself to, if I can
Forgive.
use the word, forgive her, right? Because it's not essentially forgiving that he's doing, because, and that's why I love Anuradha, right? Like, I mean, any narrator or author would have picked up forgiving as an idea and kind of track it through that. I think for Anuradha's character is a more realistic character in that sense that obviously this is trauma that the narrator is carrying, but it's not just forgiving that the character is doing. It's actually discovering the rationale or the reason behind it, and right, kind of coming to terms with why his mother kind of did what she did and why it was the best decision she could have taken, or like a decision that made sense to her at the very least, right? And it's a very fictionalized, interesting journey of across time and ages, and it's something I think I am very scared to read simply because of the kind of emotion that drives in me. I mean, I kind of my mother is a writer and a very creative person herself. So yeah, it's sometimes it just makes me think like I mean one of the most scariest thought I had was our family, like, just by our mere existence, the fact that she had to cater. I mean, we've had this conversation, and she tells me she very willingly kind of chose to be a homemaker, right? And as quote unquote willing a woman can be, like, we unfortunately live in a patriarchal setup, but she was very happy and willingly decided to kind of go about kind of not work or focus on this. And very of late, she's picked up her writing, which is a great relief to me in this very emotion. But I think that always a thought that's been on my mind, like, am I the person who held my mother back, right? Uh,
Right.
and that's why I find the notion scary and really don't revisit the book. But that being said, again, one of the best books I've ever read. It's on my all-time favorites. It's something I would recommend to everyone all the time. It's a timeless book. It will make you explore depths of humanity which people generally avoid, because not because they're dark or shameful, it's just uncomfortable to talk about those things. And I think, unfortunately, I think that's the best way forward to kind of explore that discomfort, poke at it, realize what it is.
Right. I think it's quite an intense book that we are talking about here.
Very.
So, any other works by Anuradha ma'am, or any other work by her? What are
So
the writing style and all?
right. So Anuradha's latest is this book called The Earth Spinner, which is which is a very interesting idea, which deals with caste and communal conflict in the context of using pottery as an art form. And just before that, like, I would actually a little bit more context for Anuradha's work, right? Anuradha lives in Ranikhet and is a wonderful writer. She's a potter herself. She's a very creative
Okay.
person. Is engaged with all kinds of art forms. Very well educated. Very well. I mean, she's a woman of the world. Has seen a lot, explored different cultures, and that's somewhat reflects in her work as well, right? So I would recommend The Earth Spinner and the book that I think, I don't know if it was the book she wrote immediately before All the Lives, but it was definitely before. It's this book called Sleeping on Jupiter. Again, both of them wonderful books. I would definitely recommend them. And yeah, Anuradha, I mean, I really don't have words for Anuradha. I think Anuradha Roy is easily, in my opinion, one of the most unrecognized, underrated author who I desperately wish the world reads more of, because it is the it's society and unfortunately the world's loss if they're not reading Anuradha's work. I would put it that to go to that extent.
Yeah, actually, I also thought of Sleeping on Jupiter is quite an intriguing title, and I now wonder what the thing it is in the story. Okay, this was not a topic to discuss in this video, but yeah, this is really an interesting title to
Right,
go through. Yeah, and
right, definitely.
so definitely, we have few Indian authors which are yet unexplored, and I think that yeah, they should be given the due credit for what they are doing. They need to promote
Mhm.
many Indian authors here on
Right.
these platforms. Yeah, I think they need the recognition as well. What do you think about the title of the book? How do you resonate it with the story?
I think it's a very apt title, right? I mean, I've already given you a brief summary of the story of the book, like the plot that plays out. And I think that's one of the most core human feeling, which I think everyone can kind of resonate with, right? Like the what if feeling, right? I mean, what if I chose medical instead of engineering? Where would I be? Or what if I went to this college in Calcutta and not Delhi? Where would I be? Right. So in that sense, the book is very aptly titled "All the Lives We Never Lived," because each decision, or like let me put it this way, like every major decision that you make in life, right, is simultaneously two things. It is a actively choosing one life over the other, and it's also passively letting go of the other lives that you could have lived,
Right.
right?
Right.
A very basic example I can give you, which I am not too sure of how many people are aware of this. Most people are aware of Kotak Mahindra Bank and Uday Kotak, the founder of
Right.
the bank. But what a lot of people aren't really aware of, that Uday Kotak had no interest in actually running a banking business or having a bank to begin with. Uday was a very talented and upcoming cricketer, but
Okay.
unfortunately, he suffered from a head injury, which kind of knocked his career out from that field into this field where he had to get into run a business, like whichever business that he wanted, and he stumbled into that life. Again, I think as I pointed out for Anandita, it was one of those. Anandita's book was one of the books that I picked up for the author. This one was one which I picked up not just for the author, but for the title as well, because in fact, it was the title that leapt out to me and not the author. Incidentally, this was my first book by Anuradha. So,
Oh,
this was my discovery or my entry into Anuradha's beautiful writing style. So, yeah, like I think, I mean, it was one of those classic cases of judging the book by its cover, or in this case, its title, which worked out really well, I
oh.
guess.
Yeah, so that sounds very good. That sounds very fun, actually. Yeah, we mostly end up judging the book by the cover. And I guess we can do that because we are putting in a lot of efforts in the title as well as the covers as well, as mostly equal to that of the story. So I think, yeah, we can go for this. And yeah, multiple lives, like in this story, I feel it might be the outlook of the kid who was 12 years old and the way his entire life folded out after what if his mother was with him for a particular time or in a stage when he felt the need. So yeah, that thing
Mhm.
that is also a good connecting thing in the title and the story. So is
Absolutely,
there,
absolutely.
yeah, so is there anything that you carry on from this book or something that you want our readers to carry on?
I think one thing which I think the book really kind of resonated for me, and which I would honestly hope readers take away from this, is that I think I'm not a parent, but I'm a child. I am always going to be someone's child. And I think when it comes to parents, we kids are weird. And by we kids, I mean anyone who's a child, right? Like, so even when you're 50 and your mother's 70 or your father's 675, you're still a kid. Like for them, you're their child. And I think uh, we are always very weird to the extent that most families, it's very difficult to imagine your parents in non-typical things, right? Like, I mean, if your mother's a homemaker or your father's a businessman, imagining them, say, like a clingy romantic couple, or like, a person who, like, say, likes to go watch, say, Shah Rukh Khan films in the theater, or these are
Something out of normal or
individuals,
which we are not used to.
right?
Uh,
That's exactly what I'm saying. Out of the normal. These are things which human beings engage in. Like, I mean, you wouldn't be really surprised at your friend expressing his or her sexuality, right? Or talking about their themselves as individuals. But we as kids kind of start pigeonholing our parents into this one identity that they have as your parent.
Right.
And anything which challenges that notion kind of scares you. So I think what the message I would really like readers to carry forward is the fact that as children, I think it's our uh, duty is a strong word, but I would strongly urge our uh, an action that we ought to engage in is trying to encourage and let our uh, parents let
Be
them
an
be free.
individual that way. Yeah.
Yeah, let them be individuals. Let them, please don't, like, let's try and not pigeonhole them into this one equation or one lens through which we look at them.
Yeah, right, right, correct. So that's quite a deep thought. And in fact, those who are not readers but they are watching this video, I think you might relate it with some movies that we have here. Like we have Shakuntala that we had the movie where she says this thing that yeah, I'm an individual other than being a mother. So I want to pursue my taste in mathematics and I want to take it further.
Mhm.
And even this out of the normal thing was there in the most famous series Friends, where Chandler took the step and accepted his
Mhm.
father for what he
Yeah.
came out as a person.
Right.
So yeah, that is something that you can relate to if you are a non-reader and you are not going for this. Okay, so this was an interesting book. And moving on to the third book, which is the third book that we're talking.
So the third book, it's out of the three, the latest book. The book's called The Book of Everlasting Things. It's written by this wonderful, wonderful woman named Aanchal Malhotra. It's a beautiful love story set during pre-partition and partition India. Actually, let's call it partition India because it starts off in the early 1940s, and is a journey from then to into the modern era, and traces the journey of two characters, right, Firdaus and Samir, and their how their journeys trace out, how their love story plays out, right? And the interesting bit in this, I really don't want to spoil the book, but I think at least a part of it is imaginable. I mean, Samir, a Hindu, Firdaus, a Muslim, fall in love, partition happens, things are bound to go south. Okay, I'm not bound to, but I am actually apologetic for mentioning it that way. But I
No,
mean, it
but
was a
in
very
that era, it
it,
was sort of bound.
my point largely being that it faced there were something that went wrong in that relationship and how that played out over the years, right? And it's a wonderful book because it also traces the suffering of World War I warriors and soldiers into the narrative, and at the same time also chronicles a journey across generations. Like there are different elements and people and family members involved throughout the story, kind of interplaying and making the story go forward, but how each decision a person takes kind of influences their relationships with the other, but also the person as a individual, right? And yeah, so it's a wonderful book. It's just come out and it's been getting rave reviews. Uh, so yeah, that's the third book that I want to talk about.
Yeah, okay. So now, after having we are exploring the relationships in these all three books. So we had a mother-daughter and a daughter-father relationship. Then we had mother-son relationship, and now this is a love story that we're talking about. So, what are the things that you liked about this author, or any other works that you would like to talk about?
Right. So just first answering the question about relationships, this is in that sense one of those. I mean, the first two books dealt with slightly unusual equations as the main ones. Here we have a more classic romantic tale of a boy and a girl falling in love with each other, but they're not only the sole narrative, right? They have beautiful depth of the boy exploring his side of the family and his equation with his father, his Tauji in particular. For those who are not familiar with the term, Tauji is his father's elder brother. The same goes for Firdaus, like the girl also exploring different her relationships mainly deal with her mother and her father. One for me, the very interesting equation was her equation with her mother, right? Or like actually not her equation, but how both her parents influenced her life choices or her life decisions and where that flew from. To give you context on Aanchal, Aanchal is a oral historian. She had one of her first book was Remnants of the Separation, which is
Okay.
her first book, and the second book is titled In the Language of Remembering. If I'm not wrong, I might be wrong about the second title, but both of them were non pieces of non-fiction. And what Aanchal does is a very fantastic way of documenting one of the biggest human tragedies that has happened in the world, that is the partition, right? But she, her first book was widely popular and kind of evoked emotions across the country, largely because it traced partition from a very human perspective. She interviewed families or survivors or families of survivors of the partition. But the interview revolved around when they fled from India to Pakistan or Pakistan to India. What was an object that they fled with, right? Or what is the one object that they kind of chose to run away with? And it's a very interesting thought exercise I had with my friends and my family, and often with other people I meet. That say tomorrow you have to just leave your house forever and not come back, and you're given like a minute's notice, or like say 10 minutes, right? You have people out there on the streets who are baying for your blood to kill you. Uh, what do you think you're going to run away with, right? What is the one object you know that you can't ever come back to this place ever again?
What are
You
you
don't
ready to
know if
do?
when you will come back. Yeah, what screw what are you ready to discard? What is it that you're going to take? You can take one thing.
Right.
But anyway, that's where Aanchal began her journey, at least for me. Both of her first two pieces of non-fiction revolve around this idea. And then this is her first piece of fiction that she's written. I was a huge fan of her non-fiction work, and I was very, very interested in picking up what she's going to write, and I was absolutely not disappointed. In fact, she goes to the extent of using karigari and calligraphy and perfumery, like ethers
Okay.
that are
Right.
made by this
Right.
thing. Like she uses these more rather older forms or techniques which are now forgotten to kind of built into a narrative, and it's a very beautifully written book. Again, all three of the books that I mentioned possess this ability to I was in tears, and I was by the end of the book I cried a couple of times. I had to go and talk to my parents and talk to my girlfriend about it, about how the book made me feel. I don't know,
Movie.
deeply emotional book. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. So I also had a video on this channel like where we are talking about heartbreaking books which really move you, and a few of them were including these concepts of war and partition. Like one very famous author is there, Manto, Siddharth Gupta Manto.
Hmm.
Recently his anniversary was there, birth anniversary. So that was there.
Right.
But yeah, his writings are also sort of taking the inspiration of what we can say is the moving the scenes from the partition directly to that of the pages. And those
Right.
are actually the pictures you stories which will transport you to the world, and you will actually be dumbfounded at the end of the story. So it
Right.
will make you, it will force you to think about what is actually going on in the mind of the writer, or the people that he talked about, or the stories that he made around him. So yeah, this
Right.
itself is a topic which can make person think. So I also heard that this book is quite critically evaluated. Like people are finding it. Yes, there can be things like which are not very much popular, or we can say which people are not into it because of their extended pottery and the thing that you talk about perfumery. The detailings about it might seem boring to people, but as per the time that what I felt by your narrative, it's like as per the time that we are talking about, it might fit in. And the small objects that we have in our houses always hold an aesthetic value, which is a quite common word that's going on nowadays on Instagram and everything. The aesthetic value that we have about the small pot that our grandmothers have, or small
Right.
stove, or some coins like 25 pice coin or 1 pice coin back
Yeah,
when.
and I think what Archel does is not like deal and jump directly into the details of the art forms that she's working with, right? They're interwoven into the story to kind of reflect uh maybe a different era that's bygone, right? Like I mean, we live in a world of laptops and computers where sending a letter or mostly means typing out an email, right? It means not being careful with your grammar because there's autocorrect. It means not being
Autocorrect.
careful with your words, being as verbose as you can because you can always press backspace and delete. As opposed to say a world where you had pen and paper or a quill and a parchment to write on, right? Or the
And then
idea of,
those
well,
letters
let's
are
say.
much more closer to the people and much more closer to emotion.
Right. So, I mean, the very fact that the kind of involvement you have with those kind of artworks or those forms of engaging with people is a lot more than anything else that you'll ever be engaged with. So, I think in that sense, and the fact that weaves this into the narrative not just as their profession or something that is an integral part of their life, but also into the narrative as to how these characters and how the stories and the families develop, right? And I think that is largely beautiful because we kind of tend to forget who we are as human beings, also traces its roots back to what we're doing, and like it not necessarily like in an artistic form, but plays out in different ways, right? Like, I mean, I come from a family, an extended family, which works in the financial markets, and it influences a lot of things that we do in life, like the way I think or behave or have been shaped throughout my life.
So, last question that we have for this book, that the thing that you take away or the thing that you want the reader to take away.
Think that one of the things that I took away is something I can't particularly talk about right now, is largely just because of the fact that it'll be a spoiler for the book. So I
Okay.
don't want to talk about that. I'll talk about a couple of other things that were minor things, not minor, but comparatively minor to the major thing that I took away. One of the things that I took away was the human heart. I wouldn't even say the human mind, but the human heart kind of will always learn to forgive, kind of never forgets. Like it might fade away, but I think some things or some people or some memories are just become core of who you are. And I mean, because you talk about movies on your channel as well, I can actually recommend this. There's this movie called Inside Out by Disney. It's a 2015 movie, I think. It's an animated movie, and it's one of the most wonderful movies I've ever seen. I've seen it a few times, and I still cry during a particular scene in the movie. But it's a very interesting way of looking and understanding how the human heart and mind works, and I think that holds true from this. So the message I took away, which is something I always embodied, and kind of started more strongly embodying after this, is that I think as human beings, we're not careful enough with what we do with people, or like what we say to them, or how our actions go about doing things. Like we might say something in anger or in jest. Words have strong power, actions have strong power, especially with people who you care about, right? People, friends, family, partners. I think it is very, very important to kind of. I'm not saying that we kind of put on a facade while interacting with these people, but just to be conscious of the kind of role we play in their lives and the kind of impact that we can have. Emotions are just a lot more difficult to process and deal with. So yeah, that's a takeaway I have from the book.
So this was again a very intense book that we have. So these are the three
Mhm.
books that we talked about today, and the conclusion for all these three books is it is recommended for readers who are ready to go to those depths, that those who are ready to go for those intense reading. I mean, I have met people who are just beginners and they find them as quite heavy or too much indulging. So for the beginners, I think we cannot recommend these books until unless you love the movies that we have talked about. So that's the thing we do much on our channel. That what I feel is, if you like a movie, go for a book which has the story for that. If you are a beginner and you are still deciding on what genre you want, so if
Mhm.
you are a beginner, people who are reviewing it and like the movies that we talked about along with the book, then surely go for them. Otherwise, for the readers, those who are already into reading and they want to have something intense and something which explores the human relationship, emotions, and not only a love story between a man and a woman, but also between a husband, a wife, a daughter, a son, a mother, and all the relationships that we have around us. So you can go for these books. And for further recommendations, you can try on the other books on the channel. And to talk to Siddharth, you can we are dropping down the links of his channel as well as his Instagram account. So you can connect with him there. Or you can drop down the comment and I'm sure we will pass it to him and he will reply to it. So
Of
for
course.
other recommendations, you can also follow his YouTube channel where he discusses on podcast. So you will find all such discussions and the thoughts about the books that he's reading on that channel. So thank you so much, Siddharth, for joining us and for this session. It was such a pleasure to talk to you and about those books, which are quite intense and new to me as well, but interesting to talk and worthy of adding to the TBR. So I will also pick
Mm.
up these books and share the reviews.
Thank you, Kanika, for having me. And like, no, I genuinely mean it because I think it's very rare for, I mean, if it's not evident, I talk a lot. And uh, a lot of my friends read, but it's with how life is, it's very rare for us to sit down and just talk about for an hour, hour and a half about books and specific books for that matter. And this is a very interesting opportunity. I really loved my time on your channel. So thank you so much for your kind words about my channel and my Instagram page as well, and for having me on your platform. Thank you so much.